Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well on this Thanksgiving. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. I'm coming from Tiohtià:ke, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations. And there's no guests today, so we have a bit more time for any comments or questions or whatnot. But I have, I guess, unfortunately, there have been a lot of developments in Canadian foreign policy in the past few days. Many aggressive kind of measures of the Canadian government. I thought I'd begin with the most clear cut, the most sort of intense, which is Haiti. And I thought I'd start off with a principle of Canadian foreign policy, rarely discussed principle of Canadian foreign policy, which is that the more impoverished a nation, the greater the gap is likely to be between what Canadian officials say and do. Or in other words, the bigger the power imbalance, the bigger the lies that Canadian government can get away with in telling us what they're doing and everything to do with that place. And Haiti is a stark example, right? Unfortunately, in our world, power largely defines reality. And we see in recent days Canadian officials saying all kinds of kind of wild things about Haiti, what's going on, what they're doing. One thing is this announcement of sanctioning gang leaders. Big announcement designed to take attention away from the popular mobilizations and to focus in on the problem with gangs. There is a real problem with gangs, but we're getting way more attention for that than there is for the popular mobilization. And so the Canadian government announced that we're going to sanction gang leaders. And these are people who basically can't leave their neighborhood, very impoverished young men who can't leave their neighborhood. So what are the sanctions going to do, right? Next time they're in Paris, their credit card's not going to work. I mean, it's just kind of like farcical kind of thing, but because it's Haiti, you can just sort of announce this kind of stuff and the media goes with it. Another one of the kind of fanciful things they're talking about Haiti is that Mélanie Joly announced that they were going to put more resources into combating Russian disinformation that was responsible for disturbances in Haiti. So she doesn't say the protests in Haiti, the sort of disturbances. And the idea here is that, or the extent there's any logic to what's being said here, it's that people are blaming Russia or blaming Ukraine for the inflation rather than Russia for the inflation, and that inflation is having some impact on Haitian life. I can say with complete confidence that Haitian hostility, and Joly in her quote to Canadian Press basically talks about hostility to the U.S. as being, flowing out of Russian disinformation. I can say with almost complete 100% that Haitian hostility to the U.S. is nothing to do with Russia. And it's just comical even to say that. Another piece of this sort of disinformation or lies and the grand kind of like distorting of what Canada's actually doing with regards to Haiti is Joly, in announcing this Canadian meeting on Haiti at the Organization of American States, which was held in Peru last week, she announced a plan to weed out corruption in Haiti. But everyone knows, and anyone who knows anything about Haiti knows that Canada's been backing this PHTK regime and continues to be backing it, that's responsible for the biggest corruption scandal in Haitian history, the Petrocaribe scandal that's like into the billions of dollars that were pilfered, hundreds of millions, over $1 billion that were pilfered by this PHTK crowd. So the idea that you're as one person put it on Twitter, that the way that Canada was going to help combat corruption in Haiti was, quote, to force Haitians to deal with the most corrupt criminal regime in Haiti's history, put in power, supported, and protected by Haiti's, quote, friends. So the lies are obviously kind of endless when it comes to Haiti. One of the things you see going on with this push for foreign intervention, which looks like it's happening now, you have the head of the UN that's agreed to it, and I'll get to that, break that down in a second here. But this is cholera. So cholera comes back onto the scene. Now we're talking about cholera in Haiti, and it appears there is a cholera outbreak. And so they're now using cholera, the new cholera outbreak in Port-au-Prince, to justify a UN mission. But it was the UN mission that brought cholera to Haiti because they didn't care about Haitians, and they dumped their feces in waterways that Haitians were drinking from. And even after the cholera outbreak came, they continued to be caught doing that. So the height of if you want to call it irony or hypocrisy, of now trying to justify a new UN mission to Haiti because of the cholera outbreak. I mean, come on. But this is Haiti, so sort of anything goes. They're really poor. They're black. They're imperially dominated. We can say or more or less do what we want. And so it is an important point, I think, in understanding Canadian foreign policy is the bigger the power imbalance, generally the bigger the lies that Canadian officials can tell. Now, with regards to Haiti specifically, and to understand that, it's also really important to contrast what Haitians are saying with what the Canadian media is saying. So there's all these memes online talking about Haiti from Haitian Twitter, attacking Canada. These people carrying a cross, like these crucified, with the Canadian, American, and French flag, right? People condemning Canada's role in Haiti, all over Haitian Twitter, at demonstrations, tons and tons and tons of these examples. And yet none of this makes it into our media. And to get a sense of just like how sort of cynical Haitians are towards Canada, one of the most prominent journalists in the country, Robertson Alphonse, who's I think he's the editor of the news section of Le Nouvelliste, which is the like 100-year-old establishment Haitian paper. He asked Canada's ambassador to Haiti, Sébastien Carrière, a couple of days ago, this question. And he asked the same question to Bob Rae 2.5 weeks ago when Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to UN, was in Haiti. And he said, I'll read it in French and I'll do my translation. He said, Ici, il y a une thèse. La communauté internationale a nommé Monsieur Henry à travers un tweet. Là, elle lui donne un appui inconditionnel. Et quelque part, ce qui se passe participe dans un plan pour qu'il aille une intervention étrangère. So basically he says, here in Haiti, there's a thesis that the international community named Ariel Henry through a tweet. They give him unconditional support. And somehow what the plan is and they allow the disintegration of political economic life, and then the plan is to use that to justify foreign intervention. That's essentially what he asked Canada's ambassador to the UN, and then he followed it up to ask the same question to the Canadian ambassador in Port-au-Prince a couple of days ago. That question, that's a question that a dominant mainstream establishment journalist in Haiti feels the need to ask. To even ask that, for that question to appear in the Canadian media would just be like, here we go again. The Haitians are crazy. They have no idea what's going on. It would justify this sort of hostility towards Haiti, even though, and as in answer that Sébastien Carrière gave, the Canadian ambassador, his answer in responding to this, where he calls it absurd and this and that as a question, His answer, in part, is to say, well, this is crazy because Canada's been providing so much support to Haiti. We've been so active in supporting Haiti. And that's precisely why, of course, that Haitians believe that there's a plot to justify a foreign intervention, let things go so bad to justify foreign intervention, is because they know precisely, they know full well that quote unquote Canadian support has been far from a support in a genuine sense, but rather it's been about undermining the Haitian government in 2004, most obviously, but has been put in place the PHTK regime in 2010, 2011, and has been this constant undermining of the popular forces that offer a real possibility of Haiti getting out of the very difficult situation that it's under. And so what we've seen go on over the past few weeks of Canada's role in Haiti is they are preparing. They have set the stage, and they have done this quite. It's fascinating to watch it. They have got the different forces behind a plan to send a UN force to Haiti, and Canada has led the charge. The Americans have repeatedly thanked Canada for doing that, as Anthony Blinken did on Canada's meeting they held in Peru at the OAS summit in Peru, where Canada brought together 19 countries to discuss Haiti. And the head of the OAS, who of course is a Washington, Ottawa-backed individual, said basically, if the Haitian leader asks for foreign intervention, we support foreign intervention. The Haitian leader, of course, was put into place by a US-Canada core group tweet. So the Haitian leader, to call him like some independent figure is obviously a joke. And they've got the OAS on board. You had Bob Ray, Canadian ambassador, going to the Dominican Republic a couple weeks ago to have discussed Haiti with the president of the Dominican Republic. And now we have the head of the UN. Of course, the Ariel Henry said yes. They put a formal request into foreign intervention. Got the all de facto cabinet to get behind this formal request to foreign intervention. And then now you had the head of the UN yesterday announcing that he believes there should be a foreign intervention to deal with the gangs, to deal with the instability. And there's all kinds of rumors floating around of what countries are going to provide that military force. The memes that that Haitian Twitter, critical Twitter, are putting out there have Canadian troops as the soldiers that are a part of this one meme about saying that's really just a UN force to protect Ariel Henry. They have Canadian troops in that meme. So it's pretty clear that that's whether it happens, it's not 100%, but they're setting up. They're all prepared for a foreign military intervention, and Canada again was right at the center of that process. And you never know what happens, what the effect of this will be. It's possible foreign military interventions could work out okay. There could be some positive spillover effect. But if you look at the history of these foreign interventions, and you look at the interests of Washington and Ottawa, which are driving this ship, they haven't been the interests of the majority in Haiti. The foreign intervention, the UN force that was there for between 2004 and 2017, which has sort of partially continued right until today. They brought cholera, tens of thousands dead because of the cholera. They brought incredible amounts of sexual assault, sexual violence, raping young girls, fathers, fathering kids that then they leave. And most importantly, the UN mission came as part of overthrowing thousands of elected officials back in 2004. It was a UN mission designed to take over from the American, French, and Canadian forces that overthrew not only the elected president, but thousands of elected officials, and undermined a government trying to move in, I think, what almost all objective observers from the outside would say is in the right direction of stability, of somewhat functioning legal system, of putting a bit of money into the overwhelming majority impoverished, and that was a threat to those who rule the world, and had to be done away with. So that's the, likely is to continue that pattern. Certainly, the foreign military is designed to end these protests that have been massive demonstrations. One point I want to bring up that goes a bit broader than Haiti, that is I think really informative in some of the debates going around in left foreign policy stuff. I tweeted about this, and there's all these attacks out there of tankies. People defined as tankies because they view the enemy of Washington as their the ally. So they ally with dictatorships and brutal regimes and stuff like that. And I'm not saying there's no problem there. There are elements of the left, in my opinion, that go a little too far down that path. But it's in the scheme of things, it's a almost entirely irrelevant problem. Much bigger problem, of course, is the leftists and general public that just goes along with Canadian U.S. imperialism. Far bigger problem. But one of the things I find fascinating, I tweeted about this, about all the people who accuse leftists, certain segment of the left, of anti-imperialist left, as being tankies. One of the things you'll find is that none of them say anything about the popular protests in Haiti, right? They attack you as being, pro-Putin or pro-Assad, or, too close to the Chinese Communist Party, but nothing about Haiti. And the main explanation, I think, is that it's just that they follow the dominant media, right? These people accusing others being tankies is because they basically follow the dominant media. And so they don't even know what's going on in Haiti. But the Haiti thing kind of problematizes some of this stuff, because how it works, I think, with the tanky accusations is that it requires like a certain level of like demonization that, gets to the point of the corporate media. Whereas an issue like Haiti, which is mostly, they just keep it off of the agenda. Like back in 2004, there was a little bit more attention around the coup against Aristide, and they did, they painted Aristide as this horrible, dictator and repressive person. And there was some like demonization of those who were viewed as allying with Aristide by opposing Canada's invasion and coup. We were allying with Aristide, and in one sense we weren't doing that. Of course, that wasn't the primary thing. In another sense, there was a kernel of truth to that. But basically, to get to the stage of being able to accuse someone of being a tanky for allying with some brutal politician, it has to sort of be in the dominant media. And because the question of Haiti is not in the dominant media, and you can't accuse the leftists who are opposing the Canadian intervention as being allied with some brutal politician that's been widely demonized in our media, that whole tanky accusing being tanky is obviously makes it difficult. But also the more general point, to my mind, is that the Haiti issue really exposes how this segment of the left that is into accusing the anti-imperialist sections of being tankies, how much they just follow the dominant media, because they don't say anything about Haiti. They don't even know that there's mass protests happening in Haiti targeting the Canadian government. So I think that's this is a debate around the whole tanky question that we brought up in previous discussions, and I do want to actually delve into it in a more serious way. But we'll see a little bit of that with Haiti. Now, an issue where you will get accused of being a tanky for criticizing Canadian policy is the question of Iran. And Iran is another issue that the Canadian government looks like they're going to take on some sort of leading kind of pro-interventionist kind of position. Melanie Joly, foreign minister, announced, I guess yesterday or the day before, that Canada is going to be hosting a summit of female foreign ministers to, in her words, put, quote, maximum diplomatic pressure on Iran. So, what was sort of supposed to be solidarity around women who were being forced to wear the hijab has now turned into Canada hosting a bunch of probably European countries, foreign ministers, to put maximum diplomatic pressure on Iran. And, the whole sort of feminist kind of angle to justifying these interventions is not new. Of course, let's not forget Afghanistan. The troops were there to help the women of Afghanistan. Let's not forget in Libya in 2011, Gaddafi's forces were accused of mass rape in the East, which actually then Amnesty and Human Rights Watch found that was actually just totally fabricated. It's also the contradiction there is, stark, as Labor Against the Arms Trade pointed out. Canada has their response to persecution of women in Afghanistan, in Saudi Arabia, is to sell 5.9 billion in weapons since 2018. Right, we take quite a different approach to the persecution of women in Saudi Arabia. But the Trudeau government has clearly decided that the winds are blowing in favor of a more hawkish position on Iran. They announced that they were going to bar 10,000 members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard from entering Canada. They sanctioned Press TV. I don't know if people saw that, but among the sanctions was Press TV. I've been on Press TV, the Iranian state-backed television, I don't know, at least a dozen times, maybe even 24 times. Actually, a few months ago, someone from Press TV got in touch asking me if I wanted to, if I might be some sort of correspondent for them in Canada. I don't actually watch. I mean, I've watched Press TV, a few times. I don't watch it, regularly. But from what I can tell, I mean, it's a very different perspective geopolitically, but it's a interesting and important geopolitical perspective, especially when you hear CBC's geopolitical perspective. It's definitely so sanctioning Press TV to me goes quite against all this business of the Canadian government, upholding independent journalism and freedom of the press and all this kind of stuff that the Canadian government has actually been campaigning on internationally, though they don't say much about Julian Assange. But so that's an interesting development. And one of the things, and we got to remember, the Trudeau government came to office in 2015 promising to restart diplomatic relations with Iran. That question has just been totally sidelined since an early effort to do so, which as was documented, was really sabotaged by the Israel lobby. In fact, there was a segment of Montreal business community, like Bombardier airline companies, that thought there was a chance of making some sales in Iran, that were really pushing for restarting diplomatic relations. And as I think it's Joey Juno's article, where he details how that was kind of scuttled by the Israel lobby's campaigning. And you see some of that with the campaign recently, where the CBC, the National, the guest they had on 4 or 5 days ago on Iran was Shaparak Shahjarizadeh. I'm sure I got that wrong. And she's a senior fellow at the Raoul Wallenberg Center, which is the Irwin Cotler run institute here in Montreal. So definitely part of understanding the context, and you see it online with all the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs and all the pro-Israel groups really pushing hard on this anti-Iran kind of policy in the last couple of weeks. In other issues, Canadian Dimension has a quite a good article titled "Canada Voices Approval of IMF Austerity Program in Zambia." and looks at how huge of a economic role Canada plays in Zambia, and it's the history of Canada promoting structural adjustment in Zambia. The World Socialist website has a good article titled "Barrick Gold and Canadian Imperialism: A Predatory Partnership." I think it was published yesterday. Looks at Canadian Gold, Barrick Gold's role in Tanzania, and the Canadian government's role in backing Barrick Gold in Tanzania. The Maple published an article 3 or 4 days ago titled "Arms Dealers Lining Up to Replenish Canadian Military Supplies," and talks about the Canadian government with all the weapons, so many weapons being sent to Ukraine, how they're working with arms companies to see what they can do to restock Canadian military, and also to just get more weapons into the Ukrainian military's hands. Melanie Joly yesterday, I believe, she went to the demilitarized zone in between South and North Korea. That's the demarcation line at the end of the Korean War in the early 1950s, and she made a whole bunch of tweets about how the important role Canada played 70 years ago in Korea and defending democracy and paving the way for democracy, I think is the wording, how she framed it. Of course, we were supporting Syngman Rhee's dictatorship at the time that lasted for another decade, or most of another decade after the war formally ended. Well, actually, it's never formally ended after the armistice agreement was signed. And South Korea didn't really have a democracy until actually not that long ago. Military rulers for many, many decades. So the idea that this was all about fighting democracy is just, again, a kind of laughable historical revisionism. And of course, during the Korean War, Canada sent 27,000 troops. I think it's about eight or so naval vessels. A horrific war. All kinds of North Korean civilians killed by Canada. South Korea, even allied South Korean civilians, women raped, all kinds of horrible stories by Canadian troops. 3 or 4 million people are thought to have been killed in the war, mostly, of course, Koreans, mostly North Koreans. Americans decided to stop bombing North Korea when they figured out all buildings of more than 2 stories had been destroyed. So it's a really horrible a war, and unbelievably today we're sort of framing it as a sort of great fight for democracy, which is a real comment on Canadian foreign policy kind of culture and ideological formation. In her today, I guess, for Thanksgiving, Melanie Joly went aboard a Canadian, the HMCS Vancouver, which is a Canadian naval vessel that's been sent to the region, supposedly as part of Operation Neon, they frame it as enforce UN sanctions on North Korea. And the UN does have sanctions on North Korea, so they're legitimate according to international law. But the UN does not have a peacekeeping or UN mission to enforce those sanctions. That's just something that Canada has taken upon itself to do. And it's partly about enforcing sanctions and partly about sort of continuing the isolation of North Korea, but it's also partly about having a pretext to have Canadian naval vessels patrolling close alongside the American, sometimes French, Japanese, close to the Chinese territorial waters and waters that are disputed in the area. So it's the Operation Neon becomes a convenient excuse for some of that, and you have Canada a new Canadian naval ship in the region as part of Operation Neon. Shifting gears to the final issue before opening it up to comments and questions, is the Tuesday's National Post reported on that Mélanie Joly, in a press conference a couple of days before that, when she was meeting with Secretary of State Blinken I believe in Washington, that she was asked about Canada's support for fast tracking Ukraine's NATO membership. And Joly said, like, unequivocally, we support fast tracking Ukraine to join NATO. Apparently, Blinken was much more vague. He wouldn't say no, but he wouldn't say yes, or in a kind of a equivocal. So basically, no. It was effectively a no from the Americans. Why this matters and why it was put on the front page of National Post is basically saying this is John Ivison, not a very militarist, obviously National Post, a militarist place, and he was basically saying, well, this is pushing us too close towards nuclear apocalypse. And he talks about the doomsday clock, the Bulletin Atomic Scientist doomsday clock being at 100 seconds to midnight, even before the Russian invasion. And what, by pushing to have Ukraine join NATO, what you would be doing is you'd be formalizing two different dynamics that are already going on, and which would escalate both those dynamics. One is that Ukraine has sort of been a de facto member of NATO. That's what Canada's been doing in training Ukrainian forces over the past 7 years to pave the way for Ukraine to join NATO. So it would be formalizing that. And the other part is it would be formalizing Canada being at war with Russia, right? We are, in theory, all alliance members would be treaty bound by Article 5 that, Ukraine's being attacked by Russia and therefore we have to come to Ukraine's defense. Now, Canada, of course, is sort of de facto at war anyways, even if we haven't, officialized that. But this would just be, ratcheting things up one more notch, a dynamic that the Canadian government has been very keen to do. Obviously, we have special forces in Ukraine. They were prodding Canadians to go fight in Ukraine, sending weapons, providing all kinds of intelligence support to the Ukrainian military, providing financial assistance to the Ukrainian government so it can keep fighting the war, et cetera, et cetera. And so Joly's position would be just, furthering down that path. And it's kind of remarkable that that the National Post puts that on the front page, kind of warning. And yet there's so few labor unions and social groups in this country that are, raising the issue of, how far are we going to go in this escalation? What are we prepared to, put on the line in this battle? What effectively is a battle over, bits of Ukrainian territory? How far are we willing to go in terms of the possibility of more countries joining the fight, possibility of nuclear conflict? Obviously, what we're seeing today, yesterday, last couple of days, with the Crimea bridge being targeted, and then the Russians responding, it appears responding with missiles in a number of cities all across Ukraine, including Kyiv. All this is just, further ratcheting things up. And we're living in a situation where the sort of distortions are just like out of control, right? And that everything Russia does is bad, and they're always the bad guy. And it's not, I think this is an illegal invasion. I think what Russia's doing is horrible in so many different ways. But it reaches the point of just absurd. So La Presse, their article about the Crimea bridge being targeted, their article led with the Ukrainians accusing the Russians of doing it and saying it was some faction within the Russian government. There was some, differing opinions within the Russian government. They did. I mean, what I said on Twitter, joking about it, was that, well, now that, considering the fact that Russia also blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, their own pipeline, and considering that they're shelling the nuclear facility that they're in control of, it makes sense that they would also blow up the bridge that they that's their bridge that they built, and that's helps their military and their people and whatever. But this is where it's come to, right? Where anything the Ukrainian government says is just reported on as a reasonable, it's to be believed unless conclusively disproven. So we live in this climate of pretty extreme kind of demonization that just continues. Now, finally, there was another report to the House of Commons Committee on Defense. The head of the Canadian military said that, quote, Russia and China are not just looking at regime survival, but regime expansion. They consider themselves to be at war with the West. So the head of the Canadian military, Wayne Ears, is saying openly to Canadian MPs that Russia and China see themselves at war with Canada, the US, and whoever else is the West. That's pretty startling stuff. Which is obviously another way of saying that the head of the Canadian military sees Canada at war with Russia and China. So where all this leads to, I don't really know, but it certainly makes you long for the good old days when we'd only be having existential angst about the climate crisis. That was like the good old days from like 6 months ago, or I guess 8 months ago, when we'd just be concerned about the climate crisis. But on that uplifting note, I'll leave it open it up to anyone's comments or questions, and hopefully I will be able to see the hands. As of now, I don't see the hands, but let's just see if I can.
I'm there, Eve. My hand is up.
Go ahead, Laura.
I don't see any others. Well, first of all, just a silly question. I've never heard the term tanky before. Where does that come from? Tanky. So
I believe the term tanky is widespread on Twitter. I'm by many people's account, I would be deemed a tanky. And I think it comes out of, my understanding is it comes out of those who supported the Soviet invasion of Hungary in 1956, and that they were literally sided with the tanks that went into so Western leftists that supported the Soviet invasion of 1956, and they sided with the tanks, the Soviet tanks that repressed the popular uprising. I don't know much about Hungary 56. I really don't know, like what the history there. So maybe someone else does, and but that's my understanding. And so, but the basic idea is that people who or I think framed in the most, maybe the most charitable light, would be claiming, people who support, say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and saying that, like, I don't know, defending Putin because he's fighting, U.S. power. And again, I think that there is some line there where there are people who I agree with on lots of issues, who I feel like go a little bit too far down that path of saying that, like justifying Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And, you can make geopolitical arguments that justified at some level, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we should be, having a multipolar world is a good thing. And I think, U.S. power is overwhelmingly the primary problem. And I think that maybe as important all that is that our focus needs to be on Canada and the Canadian government's role in stuff, and not about like, okay, yeah, the Iranian government has done bad things, or the Chinese or Russian government. Having said all that, I do also think that we shouldn't at all be our focus, but we should be clear that Russia has violated the UN Charter by the vast majority of legal scholars and a kind of opinion, and that's wrong, and that makes it a legal invasion. It's not to say that I think it clearly was a provoked invasion and all kinds of other dynamics, but yeah. So I think that's essentially what a tankie is, and others might have more to say or differing interpretations of the tankie thing. But yeah, there's some people like pretty left-wing people that I've had a fair bit of interaction with over the years, who are just like actually kind of gone to put this in a not too rude of a way, have gone pretty crazy on the labeling everyone tanky. Like I was labeled a tanky by Todd Gordon, the author of a book called Imperial Canada, for referring to what happened in 2014 against Yanukovych as a coup. Right. And like I think it is a coup. Like first of all, I think it was a coup. So that like I'm right in what I'm saying. But even if it wasn't a coup, even if it was just like a US and Canada supported popular uprising that ousted an elected president, if you want to, like, if the word coup is not exactly the right word, like why do we go from that to like you're a tankie and you're therefore like nothing you ever say should be like listened to, or you're just like a Putinist, or like it, but there are these people online who are just completely like absorbed in basically accusing those who are criticizing US Canadian policy on Russia at being tankies. Now that of course has diminished in recent months as it's become completely obvious that this is the US and Canada are like all over this. This isn't just like the valiant Ukrainians fighting alone against the big bad Russians, which is what they tried to frame it early on, and now it's obviously the pictures are substantially more complicated than that. So that those who are accusing all the leftists who were saying that was what was happening months ago, it's a little bit harder for them to label them tankies today, but yeah, that's the kind of dynamic, and a lot of that's going on. We're seeing that with Iran right now, right? So basically, if you say that the Canadian government has a ulterior motive than defending women who don't want to wear the hijab, that you're basically being a tankie. You're basically just doing the work of the Iranian regime, and so yeah.
Okay, so Philip Blaney has his hand up.
Go ahead, Philip.
Hi. You were saying about the good old days of when the essential threat was climate change, but I mean, this is the same thing, right? It's because the focus has been taken away from climate change, which is a far greater threat than this war, because our focus is off climate change. We're not addressing climate change, so it's just getting worse and worse and worse, and the window to address it is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. They want to keep this war going on forever. So even if they win this war, the whole planet's screwed anyways. And it seems to me the West, any solutions that, if we actually had any solutions for climate change, those solutions would involve keeping the status quo geopolitically, as in the West will survive this, and the third and developing world are just going to remain poor and exploit it. And, so it's just more neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism. And I think the peace movement and the environmental and labor, they've got to sort of get together more, because these issues are all interconnected. And I was just wondering, have you heard of, I think her name's Claire Daly. She's the MEP from the
Mhm.
European
Yeah.
Union. She's from Ireland. And I think it'd be kind of good if we were to could organize something, or maybe you could get people like her and Code Pink and people from around the world and certain developing countries to talk about, their experiences in dealing with NATO in the West and this push of neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism, and the effects it's going to have on society as a whole, on democracy, on the environment, because those connections don't seem to be, not hearing a lot of them. Everybody seems to be our own little silos.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have heard. I don't know much about Claire Daly. I've seen some posts on Twitter of her making speeches that are, seem like one of the few people in the European Parliament that's challenging, what's going on. And I think I've seen some stuff on her on Palestine as well. I believe that good speeches and stuff. And, with regards to the climate crisis, I agree completely. Like one of the major horrors of what's happening, if you want to call it that, is that it's taking away the attention from the climate crisis. And to me, the environmental movement has really exposed a serious kind of flaw in their kind of one issue organizing, and where geopolitics just subsume the climate crisis, and the environmental movement has mostly tried to basically align with the Western geopolitics, right? Like Bill McKibben, I remember I was hearing him on Democracy Now! Early on, and I heard, New York Times has a story about this in Germany, where they tried to frame it as, we have to stop Putin's oil, and they basically joined in on the sort of support for this war effort, and said that it was fossil fuels that are enabling this war effort by Putin's wealth from oil, and that all kind of it seems like a sort of attractive argument in a kind of short term, anti-oil kind of argument, but it's missing the bigger picture of how the war is taking away from the real, the other major crisis in our world. But someone like Bill McKibben, I wrote about this a couple years ago, with regards to the Michael Moore film. Just one second. Sorry, my son was just making a lot of noise. But that Bill McKibben has said explicitly that the Pentagon should be viewed as this progressive force in the fight against the climate crisis, explicitly. And what his argument is a couple parts to it. One is that they have the red states, people in red states that don't tend to believe in the climate crisis, tend to trust the military. So if the military talks about the climate crisis, the right-wing Republicans will buy into it. That's one. Another part is that the Pentagon has this huge research and development budget, and it's shown all kinds of success in funding all kinds of important research developments, which is undoubtedly true. But it's madness. I mean, it's madness in the narrow, in that the Pentagon consumes incredible amounts of fossil fuels, and it's madness in the macro, in that the ideals of the Pentagon, their definition of security, has nothing to do with the definition of security, most of humanity's definition of security, right? Their definition of security is it's this militarized whatever. But that's Bill McKibben, and see, if you look at people like Bill McKibben, Naomi Klein, important, the left end of the environmental movement on Ukraine stuff, total silence, right? Either like joining in on the whole thing or complete silence. They can't get themselves out of this box. They've left geopolitics in the hands of the arms companies and the imperial forces, and now the sort of dominant ideology is just like so overwhelming. It's coming at that they and like the Thomas Friedman in the New York Times a couple of days ago. Thomas Friedman is obviously establishment, kind of liberal establishment, imperial kind of thinker, but he's somebody who's been talking about climate change for he's like an Al Gore-ish kind of 15 years, whatever. He had this column 2 or 3 days ago in the New York Times where he's just basically saying that what's happening in Ukraine has changed all the calculations. The coal that was being used in Germany, we can't get off the coal in Germany because the question of natural gas from Russia, and basically we have to take the security question trumps the climate question, part of his argument, and then you so you see those kind of arguments made. Then you see these other arguments and like the liberal kind of New York Times arguments around nationalism. All these arguments are just like, from the climate movement's perspective, they're horrible. I mean, they're just horrible arguments, and they're predominant, right? They're winning, right? Because there is a truth. I mean, I was joking when I made that quip, but if nuclear war is a real like possibility, we should be more concerned about that than fossil fuel. I think that we should get off of this nuclear question and move, get away from the war nuclear question and move towards fighting the climate crisis. But I think it is also, true that if nuclear war is kind of a possibility in the short or medium term, then the climate crisis is a bit of a lesser thing. But I think what ultimately is really important is we can't let geopolitics be in the hands of the arms companies and the elite decision makers, and the climate movement needs to deal with these questions.
There's a question from Simri Gomari. Sorry if I'm massacring your name.
Hi. No, I just wanted to comment on the whole issue of what we can do. And there seems to be, like, within the political realm, our political representatives, so-called representatives, I have the feeling that they're constantly being bombarded with, they're being manipulated by lobbyists, and that these are the people, that this is the world that they live in, and this is what they're listening to day and night, and this is the alternative reality that's been created around them. And I think we have to somehow break through to those people, because for all their failings, I mean, they're all really, other than somebody suggested this morning, creating a new political party, etc. Right. Yeah, we just have to work with what we have, or at least give that a shot. And I think we have to, a lot of people, like, I know that Tamara has talked, or rather Tamara, through the Voice of Women for Peace and Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Anyway, they have also written to Melanie Joly and asked for a meeting, but she never replied. Now with the Week of Action, our group, the Peace Network, is also writing to Melanie Joly. So I really think we have to try to organize and maybe try to reach out to politicians and get a meeting and talk some, give them a little dose of reality in any way that we can without alienating them, because I think that's like straw that we have to grasp at. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think it does much use. I think certainly writing to Melanie Joly has a use. I don't think trying to get a meeting with her has a use, because I don't think she's going to be meeting with many of people that would be on this list or on this call, or groups that are associated with. So I think that's a request that's not particularly useful in the sort of from a practical standpoint. But I think meeting with Heather if you happen to be in Edmonton and around the riding of Heather McPherson, the NDP foreign critic, that's probably getting a meeting is probably a bit more realistic, and she probably won't agree, but it was worth kind of, putting a little different, ideas, putting some doubt in her head around, certainly around to do with Ukraine and Russia. So yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think setting up a new party is that relevant right now. I mean, there's many different parties. Rather than doing that personally, I think it's about rebuilding the anti-war movement. There's tons, we could be spending 24 hours a day on grassroots organizing that would be fruitful, would be productive. So ultimately, I do think you got to have some interaction with the politicians and the whole kind of formalized structure to really make the change. But there's lots and lots and lots of work to be done right now on from a grassroots kind of standpoint. That there's no end to that amount of work before worrying about setting up a new party. But yeah, I mean, I think there's no one tactic is the right one. The disruptions I think are really important. I think that sharing information with people in your circles is important. I think responding to the email action alerts that are put out by Just Peace Advocates, Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, different anti-war groups. That demonstration in Montreal 2 weeks ago against NATO, that, small 100 and maybe 150 people, but it was actually a demonstration against NATO. That is a step forward. There's been demonstrations in a number of I saw in Paris yesterday, the day before, I think there was thousands of people in part against NATO. So there is some, mobilizations taking place in some places. Obviously, Canada's, behind some of the European countries for various reasons. Getting back out on the street. I mean, there's no way around this. It doesn't include demonstrating and some degree of kind of disruptive stuff that whether we can do that right now, whether we're enough right now, but the way that we're going to really restrain Canada's contribution to escalating this conflict in Ukraine, Russia, there's got to be some mass participation, mass actions, demonstrations, kind of form. Organizing those right now is not that easy, but that ultimately is we're gonna have to do that. But yeah.
Can I ask you a question on that, Yves? Because you and your wife, Bianca, and your friend, Aaron Mate, you came out of a rich context, obviously at Concordia University, where you were engaged in things like this and foreign policy, obviously. It must have been a unique time or place. But I find now, and maybe I'm just unaware of it, but I just don't see anything coming out of campuses here in the US. They're at all engaged with the peace movement. And we in the peace movement, who are overwhelmingly, we're older, we're all in our 60s, 70s, 80s. I find somehow we aren't making that bridge with them. And I'm just wondering what you see in Canada. Do you see much political engagement by university students on issues of war and other foreign policy issues?
I don't know. I don't think there's that much. I think that the only international issue where there is, fairly serious amount of campus mobilizing is on Palestine. There is Palestine, and that goes in the US as well. I think there's pockets of left wing. I did an event a couple of days ago at Concordia, but a retrospective on the history of Concordia activism, where I talked about some of what we did in 2002 and people in other periods. And it's like a left-wing student union that's in charge of the Concordia Student Union, is trying to, spur that kind of activism. But yeah, I think there is a divide. The Mouvement Québécois pour la Paix, the group that organized the anti-NATO demo here, the people, the main driving force in that are, they're not the older, they're a bit younger than me kind of crowd. I don't think they're a campus. They're not really campus, but they're not that far off of kind of campus time. Yeah, I do think there is a bit of a generational divide around some of the peace kind of activism questions. and how do you how do you bridge that? I don't really know, besides just trying to organize things and maybe sometimes outreaching to campus groups. The question of student activism is a totally fascinating one, where I think more than almost any other type of activism, it does have this tendency to sort of peak and plateau because of the nature of just being on campus for a short period. And so but I as someone who lives in Montreal, and I partially lived here in 2012, that was the level of mobilization of students around the student strike. I mean, that's unbelievable how much mobilization took place, and that's only 10 years ago. And so there's no reason why that was a very specific issue, but there's no reason why that can't be rekindled. I was thinking about the other day, what was it about 2002 or 2003 that got hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Montreal against the war in Iraq, and obviously many other places as well. I don't know. I don't really know what the answer is. I know, some people sort of cynically believe that it wasn't really an anti-war demonstration. In the US, at least, it was an anti-Republican Party demonstration, and so it was Democrats were pushing it and stuff like that. But I mean, clearly it's possible, right? It happened in that period, and there have been other periods of growth on that. In 2002, 2003, I don't think, Concordia. I was in the student union the year when they invaded Iraq. We weren't the driving force of those mobilizations. The driving force was Échec à la Guerre here in Montreal, which was mostly kind of an older, more like, I guess, 60s, 70s kind of peace movement kind of crowd. But we, thousands of Concordia, McGill, UQAM, whatever students went to those demonstrations, of course. But yeah, how that, putting that all together, I don't really have an answer to that.
There are no further questions, Eve.
Well, if there's no other questions, it's already 7 o'clock, and I have there's a couple kids running around downstairs. So thanks everyone for coming out, and same place, same time next week. And I guess happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Take care. See you. See you.
Okay.